Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's been a few days since we talked about the Nintendo 64 core, so you know there is a new version from Robert FPGA Zoom Spas, and it brings some insane new features to the mix. It is absolutely awesome to have the following feature included, and that's going to be fast loading of the ROMs. What it basically means is the speed in which the ROM loads up onto your MiSTer FPGA is going to be so much faster. What we're going to do here is use Resident Evil 2 as an example of what the difference between the original core and the new core is, because there are some games on the Nintendo 64 that utilize the 64 megabyte cartridge, and that is a lot of data to load into RAM in real time based upon how the core was initially written. Just be aware you do need to have an unofficial MiSTer main as the recording of this voiceover, and that will be in the test builds channel on MiSTer Discord as well. But Resident Evil is an awesome game, but it would load about as slow as a shambling zombie to start. And this right here is going to be me loading Resident Evil 2 in real time. This took about like 30 to 40 seconds depending on when I was capturing it. It was not fast whatsoever. That's not a dig at the core. Honestly, if it took 2 minutes to load up, it would still be hyper impressive. But this was the speed in real time in which it would take to get into a 64 megabyte game. There was like 4 or 5 on the Nintendo 64, and 32 megabyte games would take about half the time. It definitely was a slower core to load games than pretty much anything else, just based upon the file sizes. Only Neo Geo had games that were technically larger in some aspects. Now moving over to this next capture, thanks to Vampire for doing this because I was busy all weekend. You'll see here we pick Resident Evil 2, and that is it. It took about 2 seconds based upon the footage to get into the game versus the about 30 seconds it took previously. Fast ROM loading is here, and it's going to make such a fundamental difference in the quality of life of this core. But this isn't just a fast ROM video. We're going to have a lot of viewer requests and retests as well. And I know it's taken me a minute to get to some of these, but let's start right in on the tests. And one of the #1 games everyone wants to see retested is going to be Bangai-O. This is an absolute classic game on the Nintendo 64, and it is one of the few Japanese exclusives that everyone wants to play. I will say that this game still is not 100% playable. It's going to have the same freeze after you beat the Stage 1 boss, but the graphics before then have improved marginally. Now there are still going to be some graphical glitches in this game, but this is part of the iterative process. Every new core might fix or break something a little bit slightly differently, and this game definitely has seen some improvements on that front. Used to be that when you started the game you'd see a lot of the sprites flickering in and out of existence. You will still notice that here and there, but it's not anywhere near as problematic as it was before. For a lot of this capture there really isn't anything on screen that would indicate that the graphics aren't drawing correctly, but watch closely and you will start to see some things coming in and out of existence. But that is a much improved from the last time we talked about this game, because it would have a propensity to freeze while you were playing it, and there was one of those glitches right there, and it definitely did not run anywhere near this speed. So the speed of this game is improved, the graphics of this game have improved, but it is still one of those games that must have some sort of bug or missing implementation that causes it to not get to stage 2. And I have seen Robert mention this. He's trying to track it down, and I'm sure in 2024 we'll probably see that unless he updates the core one more time before Christmas. But again, this is just a classic game. It is hard as nails. It is so unique and different than pretty much everything else on the Nintendo 64, and it's got a very strange sense of humor as well, especially on the continue screen. Not sure what's going on there, but it doesn't really matter. But I will say that this is an awesome game. It is so unique. It came out on so many different platforms, but the Nintendo 64 version is a great way to play it, and I can't wait to see this improving on the core in 2024. If you've never played Bangai-O before, definitely check it out. I wouldn't recommend on the core right now, but if you want to play it on something like Dreamcast, it is an absolutely spectacular game and so very unique. It's basically like a bullet hell shmup, except you have free range of movement around the screen. But you'll see here as we whittle down on the boss's life, we are going to defeat him, and we're going to get a little bit of a cutscene, but it's what happens after that cutscene which unfortunately keeps us from doing anything else in the game. It doesn't so much seem to freeze, it continues to play the music. You'll see this robot scroll in, but it doesn't do anything from this white screen. So playable for the first stage and nothing else after that. Now another game that a few of you have asked for, and one of my deep cut favorites on the Nintendo 64, is Duck Dodgers. This is definitely not as good as something like Super Mario 64 or Bomberman Hero, and if you don't love Looney Tunes and didn't grow up with them, you might not like it as much as me, but it's a super competent B-tier 3D platformer on Nintendo 64 that has a lot of fun gags because it is based on Looney Tunes, and if you did grow up with these cartoons, you're going to love it that much more. And it is working so well on the current core, and I would actually say it seems to be running a little bit faster than my real cartridge. I did a video on this back in the Saturday Morning Cartoons phase of my series, and it was one of those games that definitely would tend to lag a little bit on real hardware. Here, it's definitely not a perfect 60 frames per second, but that never worked on the console either. But the graphics, all of the controls, everything that makes Duck Dodgers the game that it is here, and it is working on the Nintendo 64. And if you've never played this game before, definitely check it out. It's that classic 90s 3D platformer formula that everyone knew and loved, and it is a lot of fun. It's never going to win any Best of awards for the Nintendo 64, but not every single game has to be the best of all time to enjoy it. And I know a decent amount of people out there like it because it was one of those games that I kept seeing show up in comments for new tests. And again, I'm probably going to do at least one more of these videos before the new year, so leave me a comment down below and tell me what other games you want to see tested on the most recent core. I'll definitely try to get to each and every one of them at some point in time. But one of my other favorite parts about this game is it has such charming soundtrack, as well as a lot of dialogue and voices from the cartoons itself. So go ahead and listen to the soundtrack for like 35-45 seconds and I'll be right back.
Yeah, how do I do it? You can depend on me. Yeah, how do I do it? Woohoo!
It's a fun soundtrack, it's a fun game. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. There's a lot of fun to be had here. So if you're looking for a new 3D platformer to play on the current core, Duck Dodgers is definitely going to give you a lot of fun. Don't think that it's not a good game. It's a totally competent, fun one that you should definitely check out. Now moving on to games that I've never once played outside of the Nintendo 64 core, F1 Pole Position 64 is one of them. This is not in my collection, I didn't play it back in the day, I've never emulated it. This is the first time I've encountered this game on the core, and that's a lot of fun because sometimes you're just going to get to discover new games that you can check out because of MiSTer FPGA. Now I will say that this game definitely isn't for me, but there are the fans of it out there because I've seen a lot of requests to test this game as well, and again it's one that I've never shown on the channel in this testing series. This is one of those titles, if you like simmy sort of games, if you like F1, you're probably going to really love this. If you're not so much into it, you're probably going to gravitate more towards the San Francisco Rushes and Cruisins of the world as far as Nintendo 64 is concerned. But tell me down below, did you play this game back in the day? Do you own it? Do you love it? And if you do love it, why? Andy D got this capture for me here. I played this a little bit on my own spare time, and I will say, you really need to learn how to control this as you're moving around. It punishes you for bad maneuvers, and it rewards you for learning the course, which I could totally see being a real hook as far as playing the game is concerned. But again, this is just one of those games I never remembered existing for the Nintendo 64, and when I saw requests coming in for it, I was reminded again, oh that's right, this game is real, it is something you can purchase and play on real hardware. Now as far as the performance is concerned, I don't know if this is really close to real hardware or not, because I don't have it on my Nintendo 64, so if you have played this game before, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. Now as far as the graphics are concerned, I don't see any visual glitches, and there's nothing really to indicate to me that this isn't working exactly as you would expect it to, at least on the visual and sound front. And it's another racing game on the Nintendo 64, and if you want something that's less arcadey, this is probably definitely going to be for you. And that's the great part about this core, there's something for everybody, and so many games are just working. Of course I haven't played through this entire thing, but everything that's here makes me think that you could just play this from start to finish and have an absolutely good time as long as you learn the courses, because the game is quite punishing. Now a game that I got a lot of requests for, and I'm not sure you guys are messing with me or not, but of course I'm going to show it to you, is Bass Hunter 64. Now I'm not knocking this game whatsoever or the fishing genre in and of itself. I had Get Bass on the Sega Dreamcast and still in my collection, and it is a lot of fun to play that game. But just like in real life, video game fishing doesn't really make much sense to me whatsoever, and if you hit the start button here, for some strange reason it brings you back in the menu, one of the weirdest behaviors I've seen of any Nintendo 64 menu structure ever. But you get some actual lore as to where you're fishing. You can tell the developers really loved actually making this game, and based upon the amount of requests I got to show it, there must be a lot of love for it out there too. but there's just something about this game in particular in fishing games where I always think I'm going to enjoy myself, but it's basically like real life fishing. Most of it is frustration waiting around for something to happen, except outside of real fishing versus video games, you're not just catching a buzz while you're fishing. But I guess you could grab a beer while you play this game with your friends, but honestly, it's just one of those things. These type of games are definitely made for a certain audience, and some of them are you out there because you have asked to see them. And it actually is a relatively impressive implementation of Nintendo 64 hardware. It's not doing anything super complicated graphically, but having this split screen right here rendering two completely different areas of the game, the underwater area as well as your fisherman, is a fun little bit of trickery, and it is working correctly on the core here. But this is one of those things, these games are very unique, they're very different. This is basically like Densure de Go, not because that involves trains and fish whatsoever, but because it's made for a very specific audience, and the people that love them absolutely do. So if you are one of those people, tell me down below. And it's not like the Nintendo 64 got a ton of fishing games, so it's not like you have a lot to pick from. And I will say, my entire capture of this testing it, I was never able to actually get a fish on the line, so it is very accurate to real life fishing, because I've absolutely never caught anything whatsoever in the few times I did it growing up. But if you're looking for a bass fishing game on the Nintendo 64, you could do a lot worse than this one, because I don't think there is actually a second one. I didn't look that up, but I'm just going to go with that and assume I am correct. But again, it's another game that's on the current core that works 100%, that you can go enjoy over Christmas. Maybe after you open your presents, you get some bass fishing in. But that's the current slate of tests on the current core. Let me know down below what you want to see me test next. This is a shorter video because I am very busy getting ready for the holiday just like everybody else, and I am going to be taking some time off right before Christmas into basically January 1st. So if you don't hear from me in that period of time with new update videos, that's because I'm taking a much needed break. It's been a very busy year as far as Nintendo 64 is concerned, so even I am going to take a rest. But short of that, if you have any questions, leave them down below. You got game requests, leave them below as well. I hope you guys have a great holiday season. I'll still be around answering comments, and maybe I'll sneak one more Nintendo 64 video in before Christmas. See you next time. Bye bye.